Hey, it's all right. We're gonna get you patched up. I got a live one in here. Rattlesnake 1, this is Rattlesnake 1-2. I need a litter team. Bravo Charlie corner, first floor. What happened? We found your entire team dead in the other room. Why didn't you call for help? You did? You sent your coordinates. What radio are you using? A Baofeng? We're on P25. You can't be sending your coordinates over analog. No wonder the enemy found you. As the Second Amendment culture continues to change and grow, both for the tactical and the preparedness aspect of the community, one of the biggest topics of conversation recently has been how do we further the capabilities of the civilian? And one of those major talking points has been about communications. And though we've always had people that have been interested in communications, such as the ham radio community, it's not always been at the top of our priority list for a lot of us. So today, in part 4 of the Modern Minuteman series, we're going to be talking about portable radios, or what is commonly referred to as handheld radios. But before we get started, guys, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel, check out our website, classes, products, other information, the full shebang. You know how this works. Anything you do to help us out is much appreciated. So, in order to best understand portable radios, we need to look at the recent history and evolution of the portable radio. And for the aspect of this conversation, we're going to be referring to mainly the first responder and civilian side of portable radios and not the military side, as Green Gear has a lot of differences compared to its civilian side counterparts. Although as technology progresses, they start to merge a little bit. But nonetheless, let's talk about what a lot of us in the first responder community had to deal with, not myself, but the older generation, had to deal with 35, 40 years ago, back in the 80s and the 90s. And that is simple two-way radios. Push to talk, no extreme capabilities, pretty much analog VHF and UHF. What you see is what you get here. You got a volume button, a channel button, and a push to talk. And that's really all there is about that. Fast forward into the early 2000s, and we start to see things like the Motorola XTS 5000 start to pop up, which is capable of trunking, encryption, talk groups, so on and so forth. And it really started to push the advancement of comms, not only just to the military side, but the first responder side. Fast forward even a little bit further, and now we have the APX series of radios, which is what I personally use in the fire service. On the police side, I see APXs as well, but I also see a lot of Harris radios. And there are other brands of radios that have been a major part of the progression of comms, and that's, groups like, Kenwood, Harris, all of those. But what does the standard currently look like for civilian handheld radios? For most of you probably watching this video, you were probably rocking a Baofeng, or did for a very long time, either the UV5R or the UV82 or one of its variants. And for a really long time, comms was not a major talking point or seen as that important as stuff like split times and 1R1s were. And the Baofengs, they were kind of a do-it-all in a sense. It didn't cost a lot of money. They are HF, VHF, and UHF capable. But the thing that we don't realize is this is the starting point. This is not the final destination. We recently had Mojave Repeater on the ECT podcast, and he said it best. And he said something along the lines of, this is an investment that you're not mad to push to the side or move past once it's time to move along. And that's true, because most of your Baofeng radios, you're getting in the ballpark of $25 to $50, depending on which model you get. The Baofengs have their place in the community, but they are just not what most people have made them out to be. They are not secure, they are not capable, they are not able to do any type of encryption, they are analog, it is completely open. So you are relying completely on the use of brevity codes and other, voice security in a sense when you are using a Baofeng. And, to me, I eventually as well hit a point, because I used to rock a Baofeng. I hit a point where I was like, it is time to progress my comms capabilities. I'm sure there's a lot of us that in the past or still do rock thousands of dollars in kits, but do not justify upgrading and getting a digital radio for a couple $100. You say that Baofeng is good enough, and that is not the answer. Now, what are the Baofengs good for? Like I said, the Baofengs are good for learning. You get a couple of these, you hand them out to some friends, you use Chirp and learn how to program a little bit. You learn about frequency bands and how to use them, and you learn the basics of radio etiquette. That is what these are good for. Another good purpose for these is you can put them in a Faraday bag, a good amount of these because they're cheap and affordable, or you've bought these in the past. Put them in a Faraday bag, put them to the side, and it's kind of part of your, emergency plan as far as, possible EMPs or other things like that. And, these also serve as good family handouts. You may not want to invest into, a dozen digital radios to hand out to family members or neighbors or anything like that in some type of emergency. But a Baofeng will do just fine, and it's not going to break the bank. But where do we go from the Baofeng moving forward? Like we said before, in the early 2000s and into the mid 2010s, something like the Motorola XTS 5000 was a standard to the first responder community. However, as they move on to the APX series and other brands equivalents, these have taken over the surplus market. We have the XTS 5000s, we have the EF Johnson 5100s, and many other radios that have a ton of different capabilities. The progression we get with something like this is we go from being strictly analog to having the option to be digital, whether that be P25 or that be DMR. We also gain the ability to utilize encryption with one of these. And there are a ton of different capabilities that come with upgrading your radios. And the barrier to entry, as far as something like this goes, an XTS 5000 Model 3 is probably somewhere in the ballpark of $250 to $400, depending on where you get it from or who you get it from. The most common place is probably going to be somewhere like eBay. Now, there are some people that you can buy these radios for, and they'll come with chargers, mics, they'll come programmed, they may have some encryption keys and whatnot. And you can get them for the $500 or $600 range. And that seems like a huge expense, guys. But when you're rocking thousands of dollars of kits and hundreds of dollars worth of gear in your bug out bag, and you've got thousands of dollars of food set to the side, how can you not justify spending a couple $100 in order to significantly increase your comm capabilities, specifically the reliability and the ability to become more secure, such as using encryption? And one of the biggest things with this, guys, as you look to progress your comms, is you have to understand, why am I progressing my comms, and what is the purpose, and what am I trying to achieve? So in order to look at that, we kind of have to look at what frequency bands we're going to go with first. Am I going VHF or UHF? And we have to understand why we're choosing that band that we're going to go with. If you live in a rural or suburban area where you have some trees and some gently rolling hills and whatnot, VHF is going to be best for you. You also have the availability of the frequency band, as a lot of first responders have moved away from VHF and onto UHF. Now, on the flip side, if you go to UHF and you live in a suburban or urban area, you're going to be better fitted because UHF does better with dense buildings and concrete and so on and so forth. However, your range of freedom may be a little bit more narrow, as again, there's a lot of government agencies and bands and whatnot, frequencies and whatnot that are taken up on the UHF band. So you have to first recognize, do I need VHF or do I need UHF to best, facilitate what I'm trying to accomplish? After that, if we're looking at digital comms, we have to say, all right, we're going to do DMR or are we going to do P25? And I am not well educated enough in order to best describe the differences between DMR and P25. To my own understanding and knowledge and research, it seems like DMR is a little bit more civilian market friendly, whereas P25 is more based around the first responder services. However, both of them are available, and you can find the software and the supported gear and whatnot to do both at this point in time. I'm just simply referring to when they were created and kind of how they were implemented into the system. And then once we've looked at our band, we've looked at what kind of mode we're trying to use, next we have to look at encryption if we want to utilize encryption. One of the most popular and kind of the gold standard of encryption is AES 256, which something like a surplus XTS 5000 is capable of, as well as many other radios. But there are other options. You also have, ADP if you go with Motorola, which is a non-hardware encryption capability. Some are going to be hardware, some are going to be software. And you need to understand the differences between those. With all of this, we have to continue to think about what does our budget look like and what does the bigger comms plan look like. If you're a preparedness group of 5 families, around 15 to 20 people, that's a big cost, and you're going to have to analyze what does our budget look like, what can everybody get onto, because whether you choose to go DMR, P25, your level encryption, all of that is going to be dependent on what you're willing to put and invest into yourself. And some people are going to have bigger budgets than others. The other things to consider with all of this is going to be the supportive gear if you want to be truly self-reliant in your comms capabilities. Making air-gapped tough books or laptops in order to store frequencies, encryption, and do all of your comms planning, the cables and the programming cables and all that kind of stuff that goes into it, KFD shields, so on and so forth. It goes into more past just the radio, which brings us to our next talking point. How are we actually going to utilize our portable radios? For a lot of you probably watching this, you're going to be rocking your radio on your kits, your plate carrier, your LBE, your chest rig, whatever that might be. So you have 2 options that you can utilize for truly utilizing your portable radio without taking it in and out of the pouch and trying to use it, because that is going to be a really big pain in the butt in the field. We have 2 options. We can either use a classic shoulder mic, which is very simple, very inexpensive, has upsides and downsides. Upsides, it's easy to use, they're rather durable depending on what brand you get. Downside is you're projecting your comms out into your environment. Depending on your environment, that may not be something you want to do, just for the noise factor itself. Next, we have something like these Peltor contacts. Obviously, upsides to this is your comms is going to be a lot quieter. You have an actual mic to speak into that's going to be near your mouth, so your comms should be a little bit more clear. However, downsides, you're going to have to rely on batteries to run your contacts. Another upside, I guess, that I didn't really list off is now you have EarPro built in with your comms. EarPro is important, guys. Don't lose your ears. Trust all of the veterans when they tell you that their ears ring. Outside of that, guys, there is a ton you have to consider with your portable radios. But you shouldn't let all of this information stop you or limit your interest in the topic. There are a ton of super information-packed pages on Instagram. If you head over to the business Instagram, or you head over to my personal Instagram, Jeremy_ECT_IG, I share a ton of guys' comms pages all of the time. From HF to digital radios to SDRs, all of that kind of stuff. You should continuously look to progress your comm capabilities, because communications for both the preparedness and the tactical aspect is going to be huge. Communications makes everything go a whole lot smoother, and you want those communications to be secure. If you are an analog user, you are essentially open to the world to hear. Anybody with a cheap Amazon scanner that's band capable of whatever you're using can essentially find out and hear what you're saying over the radio. And now you're only relying on brevity code to secure your comms. Whereas if you move over to digital, now the analog users can't hear you. They're just going to hear static on that frequency if they're monitoring your frequency. Then you take that a step further and you add encryption to that, plus brevity code. You start to create a multi-layer of security for your communications, because no one communication piece of equipment is going to be completely secure. None of your comms should ever be treated as if it is completely secure, because it is not. Everything has its vulnerabilities. Nonetheless, guys, reach out to people and look to progress your capabilities. And it doesn't stop at portables. Look at man packs, look at base stations, look at everything that goes along with comms, because comms is going to significantly help you in the future. Guys, that's all I've got. Until next time, train hard, train often.